How do you get over a breakup? I say go back and go back to them until you absolutely hate them and despise them. I hate when people are like, block them, never talk to them again. No, if you want to go back to that horrible, horrible man that treated you horribly, go back to him. Go back to him until you literally can't look at a photo of him without feeling disgust. That's what I had.
Even after admitting this, there is no catharsis. My punishment continues to elude me, and I gain no deeper knowledge of myself. No new knowledge can be extracted from my telling. This confession has meant nothing.
We've been told more freedom would make us happier. More choice would make us fulfilled. More independence would make relationships stronger. But something went wrong. Instead of contentment, we got boredom. Instead of partnership, we got constant evaluation. Instead of stability, we got endless questioning. And boredom, especially when paired with unlimited options and zero accountability, is not harmless. It quietly destroys things that take decades to build. Tonight, I want to talk about that boredom. Where it comes from, why it exists, despite living in the best conditions humanity has ever created. How media narratives shape it. How cost of living and modern expectations distort relationships. And why men and women are drifting further apart, not closer together. This won't be comfortable, but it will be honest. And if you stay until the end, you might understand why so many people feel empty in a world that keeps telling them they should feel free. This is the safest, most material comfortable era women have ever lived in. That's not an opinion. It's measurable. More legal protections, more educational access, more career opportunity, more social support, more emotional validation, more choice in nearly every domain of life. That doesn't mean life is easy. It means the baseline is historically high. And when the baseline is high, expectations change. For most of human history, people didn't sit around asking whether their lives were fulfilling enough. They were busy surviving, keeping families alive, holding communities together. Meaning came from responsibility, not from constant emotional evaluation. Modern society removed much of that pressure, which is a good thing, but it didn't replace it with a stable source of meaning. It replaced it with comparison, with identity, with endless self-focus, with the idea that how you feel in any given moment should dictate what you do next. That's where boredom enters. Boredom isn't neutral. Boredom isn't harmless. When boredom combines with unlimited choice, constant validation, and low consequences for leaving, it becomes destructive. And women, more than any group in history, have the ability to act on boredom immediately. Because the system is designed that way. Men don't experience boredom the same way. Men experience pressure. Men experience performance demands. A man's dissatisfaction is framed as something that he needs to overcome internally. By working harder, improving himself, adapting or accepting his position. A woman's dissatisfaction is framed as a signal that she deserves more. That difference matters. Men are still expected to provide, to initiate, to lead, to absorb risk, to earn enough to be viable, to be emotionally open but never weak, confident but not threatening, stable but exciting, reliable but never boring. And if a man fails at any of that, he's not seen as unlucky, he's seen as inadequate. Women, meanwhile, are told they are enough as they are, that they deserve happiness by default, that dissatisfaction means growth, that boredom means settling, that discomfort is a sign to leave rather than something to work through. That imbalance creates resentment on one side and restlessness on the other. Now we have to talk about media because this mindset doesn't appear out of nowhere. For years now, mainstream media, cultural commentary, and academic adjacent outlets have increasingly framed traditional family structures as outdated, restrictive, or inherently flawed, not just in subtle ways, in direct ways. Essays arguing that the nuclear family is a tool of inequality. Articles suggesting the family should be abolished or replaced. Commentary framing long-term commitment as a limitation on personal freedom rather than a foundation for meaning. These ideas didn't stay in theory. They entered culture. And once something is treated as a legitimate intellectual position, it spreads. It gets framed, softened, and normalized. You don't have to agree with it for it to influence you. You just have to consume it. The message doesn't have to be break families to produce family breakdown. It only has to consistently question the value of staying. Stability becomes stagnation. Commitment becomes confinement. Routine becomes emotional death. Discomfort becomes oppression. And liberation becomes leaving. Leaving relationships, leaving roles, leaving responsibility, leaving structure. Quick heads up before we keep going. I've got a Facebook page where I post a lot more of this stuff. It's not a business page, it's not monetized, and it's not a brand. It's a non-profit page. I run it purely because I think these conversations actually matter. No sponsors, no ads, no fake positivity, just raw clips, thoughts, arguments, humour, and uncomfortable topics people avoid. I'm not trying to sell you anything. I'm not pushing an agenda. It's just a place for people who still like thinking, questioning, disagreeing, and laughing without everything being cleaned up for algorithms. If you agree with me, disagree with me, or just want somewhere that isn't filtered to death, the link's there. You'll usually see stuff there before it ever hits YouTube. Alright, back to the video. This matters because when society constantly frames fulfillment as something external and ever-changing, boredom becomes a justification rather than a warning sign. Instead of asking, what am I contributing? The question becomes, what am I missing out on? That mindset is catastrophic for long-term relationships. Now let's address the question people ask next. Why does this happen when society is objectively better than it's ever been? Because comfort doesn't create meaning. Responsibility does. When survival pressure disappears, the human mind doesn't relax. It searches. It compares. It evaluates. It creates dissatisfaction where none is strictly necessary. Women today are raised on conflicting messages. They are told they are independent and don't need men. They are told they deserve constant emotional fulfillment. And they are told men should still provide stability, security, and leadership. Those ideas cannot coexist without friction. Add cost of living into this, and the contradictions intensify. We are living in an era where housing is harder to obtain, wages lag behind inflation, and long-term financial stability feels increasingly out of reach. For men, this creates pressure. For women, it creates selective expectation. Women are told they don't need men. But economic reality still rewards pairing with a competent, stable man. So men are judged more harshly, not less. If a man isn't earning enough, progressing fast enough, or showing upward mobility, he's viewed as a liability. At the same time, women are encouraged to resent dependency, even when economic conditions quietly enforce it. So men are expected to provide more under worse conditions, while receiving less respect for the effort. That breeds dissatisfaction. Women increasingly view men not as partners in building something, but as risk assessments, emotional workloads, financial calculations, opportunity costs, and media reinforces this framing constantly, portraying men either as unnecessary, incompetent, or disposable unless they are exceptional. The average man disappears from cultural respect. An attraction cannot survive contempt. Men feel this. They feel assessed rather than chosen, measured rather than valued, replaceable rather than respected. And when men feel replaceable, they stop investing emotionally. They withdraw. They disengage. They avoid commitment. That emotional distance then gets interpreted as a lack of effort, which feeds the narrative that men aren't good enough, and the cycle continues. Women's boredom doesn't emerge because men suddenly became worse. It emerges because expectations became unstable and infinite. Desire is no longer anchored to character, effort, or shared history. It's anchored to stimulation. And stimulation always fades. No relationship can compete with endless novelty. No partner can outperform infinite comparison. No family can survive if boredom is treated as a moral justification to leave. Historically, societies understood this. Commitment wasn't built on constant emotional highs. It was built on discipline, loyalty, patience, and shared responsibility. Modern culture replaced that with self-focus and feeling. And when you teach people that their internal emotional state should always match their external circumstances, dissatisfaction becomes inevitable. So boredom gets externalized. It must be the man. It must be the relationship. It must be tradition. It must be society. Rarely is it framed as a normal phase that requires depth and endurance. And media plays a central role here. Stability doesn't generate clicks. Conflict does. Questioning does. Dissatisfaction does. A culture addicted to novelty never settles. And a culture that never settles never builds anything durable. The result is visible everywhere. Men disengaging from dating and marriage. Women reporting higher dissatisfaction despite greater freedom. Families weakening. Children growing up in fragmented environments. Loneliness increasing across every demographic. This isn't liberation, it's fragmentation. And historically, when societies weaken the family as a stabilizing unit, they don't create freedom. They create dependency. People don't stop needing support. They just shift where they get it from. Institutions, platforms, corporations, digital validation systems. Is this linked to older ideological critiques of the family? Yes, partially. Classical Marxist theory viewed the family as an economic structure that reinforced inequality. Modern culture abandoned the economic framework but kept the suspicion of stable institutions, the label doesn't matter, the outcome does. A society that teaches people to constantly question foundations without replacing them with equally stabilizing alternatives doesn't produce fulfilled individuals. It produces restless ones. Women aren't bored because men failed them. They are bored because society told them fulfillment would come from endless self-expression instead of shared responsibility. Men aren't withdrawing because they hate women. They are withdrawing because the emotional contract became unstable and one-sided. This era should be producing the most stable relationships in history. Instead, it's producing distrust, isolation, and dissatisfaction. Because survival was solved, but meaning wasn't. Boredom isn't a sin. But acting on it without restraint destroys everything that requires time to build. And until society is honest about the narratives shaping desire, expectation, and commitment, this cycle won't stop. It will just keep getting framed as progress. Thanks for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.